I am Josh Burns.
I am Andrew Roark, and this is Unshaken Truth, where we will examine the causes and impacts of wrongful convictions resulting from junk science like the shaken baby syndrome hypothesis and explore ways to end such miscarriages of justice.
Why us? Because we were wrongfully convicted of child abuse based on the now debunked shaken baby syndrome hypothesis, or SBS. We both spent years pursuing justice before finally being exonerated in 2024. In both of our cases, doctors ignored underlying medical causes for the children's condition and rushed to judgment based on flawed pseudoscience that has now led to countless wrongful convictions and shattered families' lives.
By digging into causes of junk science, wrongful convictions, and educating people about the problem, we can help make the criminal justice system accountable for the misuse of flawed evidence to put innocent people behind bars.
Around the same time we were exonerated in 2024, we learned about Robert Roberson, who was then facing imminent execution in Texas in a shaken baby syndrome case, despite a mountain of evidence proving that he, too, was an innocent man.
Robert's case horrified me. The idea that someone could be executed in a situation where there was actually no crime based on the exact same junk science of shaken baby that led to my wrongful conviction really shook me. His case is so similar to mine, except even worse. His daughter died. I sat there and I realized that had the child in my case died, I would be sitting right next to Robert on death row.
In our first season, Unshaken Truth will highlight Robert's case and feature guests who have been involved in the ongoing work to save his life. We want you to have a little background on Robert and his case before we take you to the episode. Robert is a person with autism spectrum disorder, but he was diagnosed only after his wrongful conviction.
Robert was convicted and sentenced to death after his toddler daughter, Nikki, who had been chronically ill her whole life, died in 2002.
There are lots of medical records that show what really caused Nikki's death. She was suffering from severe viral and bacterial pneumonia that had progressed to sepsis and a bleeding disorder. Nikki's respiratory symptoms were made worse by dangerous medications that should have never been prescribed to someone her age or in her condition. None of this was considered in Robert's case. Instead, hospital staff and law enforcement rushed to judgment, and he was convicted and sentenced to death based on the junk science shaken baby syndrome theory.
Parallels between Robert's case and mine are striking. Robert's execution was stayed in October of 2025 to allow an investigation of whether those similarities warrant relief in his case, just as I was finally exonerated.
The court will be considering that question soon, but we want to dig into these issues from our perspective and explore the unshaken truth about junk science wrongful convictions. This is Unshaken Truth Podcast with hosts Josh Burns and Andrew Roark. Today, we are here with our guest, Representative Lacey Hull. Representative Hull is a native of Houston, Texas, born and raised in Houston House District 138. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science and history from the University of Houston. She was first elected in 2020 into the Texas House of Representatives, and since then she has been an advocate for parental rights, and she has been involved in bipartisan efforts to advocate for a new trial for Robert Roberson, a Texas man on death row accused of shaken baby syndrome flawed hypothesis. Thank you, Representative Hull, for being here with us today. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you both for having me.
Great.
What first drew you to public service, and what issue did you expect to focus on when you first ran for office?
I volunteered before I ever ran for office. I was grassroots. And parental rights was something that got me involved. It moved me past just being a voter to being an activist. And so, I would take my son with me to the Capitol. He would come along with me to help other people's campaigns and to help other people get elected. And so the guy that had the seat before me decided to retire. And so I decided to run for office. And that's what sparked it. I never thought I would run for office. So I always tell people never say never.
Right.
Because here I am. But parental rights has always been a huge passion of mine. And so I knew that was something that I wanted to focus on when I got into the legislature.
Was there a specific moment when you realized that parental rights would become a central issue for you?
Again, because I had already worked on it before I ran for office, it was something that I was extremely passionate about. And so I knew it was something that I wanted to focus on and all different aspects of parental rights. And so it has just always been a passion of mine. Becoming a mother really sparked that, and wanting to make sure that I helped others and left Texas better than I found it.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, we appreciate that. We are, with everything that we have seen firsthand as exonerees falsely accused of child abuse crimes when medical issues were not considered. We really appreciate folks like you who are fighting for parents and for the family, because, we see that so much these days, how the family unit is under assault.
Even before I ran for office, I saw some of these cases. I sat in some of the court hearings for families who were wrongly accused of child abuse. And so I saw this before I ever ran for office.
What initially brought Robert Roberson's case to your attention, and what about it concerned you the most?
An advocate reached out to my office after they saw my involvement with Melissa Lucio in her case. And so they reached out to let me know about Robert Roberson. And then I reached out to some of my other colleagues, and things got moving from there. And, I had dug into Robert's case, and so did my staff. It was a team effort, and so many things were alarming. And again, because I was involved in some of these cases before I ever ran for office, this wasn't new, and Robert's case was not an anomaly. And so all of the things that I saw in many other cases, I was seeing in Robert's too. And the jump to Shaken Baby, which I know both of you obviously know about, unfortunately, and how devastating that is, and how where were all of the medical testing to rule out everything else prior to making that diagnosis? And it wasn't there. A jury never heard any of that. The jury never saw brain scans. The jury never saw pictures of Nikki. All they saw were horrific photos of a baby's of an autopsy of a baby's skull open, which would be alarming and heartbreaking and upsetting for anyone to see. And so the jury never saw any of that. The jury never, there were no experts that the jury heard from that properly provided Robert with exculpatory evidence. And so there were so many concerns. Those are just some of them, but those were things that initially jumped out at me as to, this isn't right, something's wrong here. And the more we dug into it, it was at every turn, Robert's case was handled wrong at every single turn from the get-go.
You were able to visit Robert on death row actually a few times, I think, and pray with him. Can you tell us about that experience?
It was wonderful. And I think you've met Robert too, and he is just such a wonderful man. And when you meet with him and talk to him, it just further, even more that he is absolutely not guilty of the things that he is accused of. That man, I tell people, I'm like, if you're ever questioning your faith, go sit with Robert. I mean, he is just incredible. A man that has every right to be angry and bitter, and he's not. He is so kind and gentle and filled with hope and faith. It was being with Robert and being able to pray with Robert is like no other experience. I hope everybody, and pray that everybody gets to experience that one day when I pray Robert's able to be out in the world and released.
Amen. You hit the nail on the head, because I go and see him twice a month, and um, it's a drive down there. It's a full day between driving and a 2-hour visit, because we're up in the Dallas area, right?
Mhm.
But I got to tell you, I can't miss those visits. I thought I was going to go in and encourage this man, and he encouraged me. I leave
Yes.
with my cup filled.
Yep.
He shares the gospel with everybody he talks to. He shares his faith. And like you said, I just keep telling everybody that I meet the same things you just said, that the man has no bitterness. No, he's not angry. He's forgiving. He's gracious. And he is just got a soft heart, well spoken. Of course, he's on the autism spectrum, but he is able to articulate thoughts. He shares with me these messages, because he told me on his uh, two-tiered, housing area, there's, I think, 15 or 20 cells, and he reads me his weekly message. And they have death row church, where Robert on Sundays reads his sermon with Bible commentary, and he shouts it out through the bars to the men, and they all want to hear that. And that's how they're doing church. It's just amazing to be down there with him and witness that. And when I'm walking out of that prison, I'm thinking about myself and Andrew here, and I'm thinking, okay, we're exonerated, we've been declared innocent, he's on death row, I'm leaving my brother behind. Why is he still on death row? Why, after 24 years, why hasn't a new trial and new evidence been heard? All those questions. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. He is an amazing guy. I hope that we all have the chance to meet him and celebrate with him on the outside, and be able to give this guy a big hug and everything. It's just amazing. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Definitely. And when the legislators, when we went to meet with him, we are able to hug Robert and hold hands and
Incredible.
pray. And so I tell people, I'm like, if he was such a threat and so violent, we would never be allowed to do that.
Right.
He's just the most gentle man and
Yeah.
so kind.
Amazing.
And I mean, that's why we're doing this, is to give people like Robert a voice. People that are locked up, they don't have a voice. Nobody can hear them or understand them the way they are. So, I mean, that's the whole reason I got behind this and wanted to do this, was to give those people in there a voice that are still, locked up. And
Amen. Well said, brother.
Yeah, it's
so,
incredible what you're both doing, being able to have gone through what you both have gone through, and then to give back in this way is so wonderful and incredible.
thank you. Thank you. So, for our listeners unfamiliar with it, what do you believe are the key facts people misunderstand in Robert's case?
Gosh, there's so many. There's so many. I think that, again, I think one of the biggest things is people think, oh, well, it's been this long. He had a jury trial. There's been all these appeals. He must be guilty. And it is so far from that. That is the furthest thing from the truth. Again, I know I said it earlier. The jury never heard all of the exculpatory evidence. The brain scans were found hidden in the basement. What was it, like 15 years after? Like, come on. Just simple, even just simple things like that. And then it seemed like the court, the trial record clearly shows that this was a shaken baby case, clearly. But since then, the last couple of years, it seems like people have tried to muddy the water and say it was this abuse and her head was bashed in and abusive head trauma. But abusive head trauma, I mean, shaken baby and abusive head trauma, it's like they're just interchangeable
Right.
Diagnoses now. And so I think people don't understand that. And again, the pictures and brain scans prove that there was no trauma to her head. Her head was not bashed in. That is a lie. And the pictures and brain scans prove that. Again, a jury never heard or saw any of those. And so I think those are some of the biggest, the most alarming things that I think when people hear, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And that is why he needs a new trial. So all of this evidence can be heard. Robert never had experts. The county was never going to pay for that. And this goes back to, if you do not have real and proper and legitimate representation and counsel, you're screwed.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what happened to Robert. Every single step of the way, there was never money for experts, and he didn't have that. And it also goes back to, if you don't know your rights, you really don't have them. And that is exactly what happened to Robert. So a new and fair trial to where everything can be heard is absolutely what is needed.
Yeah.
And I guess for you guys, I know that y'all've gone through that,
Mhm.
and um I'm sure it's a lot of the same things, all of the testing that wasn't really done, and the jumping to this label
Mhm.
Mhm.
and diagnosis before any of the testing was done. And it's like we see the same thing in case after case after case.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. It's so true. And the other thing that's really striking to me, I took the time before I got involved in Robert's case to read the trial transcripts. I read them cover to cover, and it took days. But um, you know how the sexual assault allegations
Ugh,
were brought forward and completely unfounded, completely decimated in court. The nurse who said that she was certified to examine for that had to recant that under cross-examination and admit that she didn't have the certification. But yet, the judge still allowed the prosecutors to use it in closing arguments. I mean, there's just all these glaring issues in this trial. And then we have an attorney general's office who still repeats those same, they just keep ringing that bell. They keep ringing that bell. And it's like, they know it's not true. They know it's been refuted. It's just so egregious to me that people can feel okay doing that, but even more so that a trial judge would allow that to happen. It's just a problem that we see in our system where judges have to take a stand and not feel intimidated by a prosecutor and make sure that they're applying the law fairly to all citizens, you know? So,
right.
yeah, it's incredible.
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
autism thing as well.
Yeah.
His undiagnosed autism. He was
Yeah.
judged on that flat affect, and my daughter's autistic, so that hits close to home with me too. The way she communicates and Robert communicates are similar. So, um, yeah, all those things are just kind of glaring out there. And I hope that people will take the time to look into this situation and become involved. So,
Even things like the autopsy. It
mm,
was a complete flawed autopsy.
yeah,
That medical examiner had already been told, "It's shaken, baby. Arresting dad. It's already done." So it was just a box check.
hmm,
The medical examiner didn't even look at why Nikki was in the hospital, did not look at any of her medical records, did not look at any of the drugs that were prescribed to her and that were improperly prescribed.
right,
None of that was looked at. None of her medical history. And the fact that she was, I'm going to say, illegally removed from life support, Robert was the only person who was able to consent to her removal of life support,
hmm,
and he did not. It was the
right,
grandparents that did, and they had no legal right to do that. But the
mm,
judge just said, "Here you go. It's
right.
fine. You can." And they admitted that on that Lester Holt podcast.
And I understand that you and your team are the ones that uncovered that fact through the hospital.
Yes.
Yes.
I because the hospital wanted to make sure that we knew that they followed all the protocols. So it was the judge that said that they could that the grandparents had the right to remove life support. So when we had to explain, well, if the grandparents did not or had to get the rights to Nikki's body after she passed away to get the rights to her remains, wouldn't that mean that they didn't have the rights to her at the time she passed? And I mean, they didn't know. So it was the hospital seemed like they tried to do everything to make sure that everything was that they were following the law. It was the judge who allowed these grandparents to remove the life support when they had no actual legal right to do that. And the rush to remove her from life-sustaining treatment just so they could charge him with murder.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
I mean,
such
it's horrible.
yeah.
And telling him that he can't go to the hospital, he's not allowed to go there. That was not legal. He had every legal right to be there, and they
Right.
told him he couldn't.
Yeah.
He told them that he could not go, and he didn't find out that his daughter passed away until they came to his home to arrest him. He had no idea.
Wow.
And it's just, again, every step of the way, it's just horrible. It's so scary to think that you could be falsely accused of something in hurting your child, and that someone else is allowed to remove life-sustaining treatment
Mm.
for your child, and you have no knowledge of it whatsoever. And this whole time you're innocent and you did nothing wrong, and
Right.
your rights were completely trampled. It is that should terrify every single parent.
That's one of our main messages with this podcast that we are trying to drive home to everyone is that what happened to Robert and what happened to Andrew and I can happen to anyone. You don't have to be a parent. You could be an aunt, uncle, grandparent, daycare worker, babysitter. And if you're the last one alone with an
Nanny.
infant or a child, nanny, all these things.
Yeah.
And that child needs to go to the emergency room and they display with the wrong type of symptoms, and a child abuse pediatrician looks at it in only one way, you are quickly in the crosshairs of guilty until proven innocent. Like Andrew and I talk a lot in our cases of we took our babies to the emergency room looking for answers, and
Mhm.
then they flip it around and they accuse you and they're asking you to provide answers. And it's like, we're here for that. That's why we came. We came for help. And now it's just a lot in the system that needs to change. And we're excited to talk to you about some of those things too. So next question here. What has your involvement taught you about how Robert's case moves through the Texas system?
Well, I mean, I'm a legislator and I'm not an attorney, but I've learned a lot about the judicial system through all of this, even more so. And I think it just goes back to, I think that people think that because it has moved through and he had a jury trial and then he's had all of these appeals, well, then everything must have been done fairly and right. And this is the right outcome and he is guilty. And that's that. Gosh, it is so far from that. And I think just how much more work we still have to do to change things. I mean, it's why we have passed even like Michael Morton, the Michael Morton law, the junk science, all because we know things go wrong sometimes. And I think that's been the biggest thing.
So during all this, have you encountered any resistance from colleagues when speaking up about this case?
Well, a little bit from some people, but I think it's more of this is very heavy. It's a very heavy subject, and most people don't work on these issues. They don't know about them. And so it seems pretty overwhelming to be able to get involved and to speak out on it. I think unless you have been working on these issues, it just seems like this mountain that you don't know anything about. So I think it's more of that and people not wanting to get it wrong. And so they just don't want anything to do with it.
How does this situation reflect broader issues in how expert testimony or medical evidence is used in court? I know, like you said, you're not an attorney, but you've encountered these issues along the way.
Right. I know, like the legal white coat effect, right? Someone comes and says one thing and it's taken as fact instead of medical opinion. And if the defense doesn't seek a second opinion, or if the county if there's not money for experts for the defense, then you're just out of luck.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just out of luck. And gosh, that is it's that is not justice. That is not fair, and that is not justice.
Yeah. You know, one of the things we often hear from child abuse pediatricians, it's kind of a canned response. We hear it from a lot of them. They will say, even on the witness stand, they'll say this, and they'll say this in talks and interviews and stuff too. They'll say, "I cannot be held responsible for what law enforcement and courts do with my findings," and we think, well, that seems so disingenuous since detectives, we just talked to retired detective Brian Wharton, and it's, well, the doctor says we're not medically trained, right? So when the medical community and the courts and law enforcement intersect, for a child abuse pediatrician to say that, it seems very, like I said, disingenuous and just a bunch of hogwash, quite frankly, because I mean, law enforcement has to go with what a doctor's telling them, and like you said, safeguards, some safe rails to be in place, second opinions. You know, maybe going outside of their own peer group to talk to others who might be seeing, hey, you got blind spots here.
Which is why we have the junk science statute
Mm-hmm.
that has been rarely used. I mean, I know, Andrew, uh, it thankfully in your case, but I mean, for so many others, I mean, it has been majorly underutilized.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's our next question. So, what reforms, if any, should Texas consider to prevent questionable shaken baby convictions?
Well, I think that, gosh, there's just so many changes that need to be made. But again, it goes back to we've already made changes knowing that the system gets it wrong sometimes. Junk science, Michael Morton, we've already talked about those things. But these caps should have to rule everything else out before they get to child abuse. They should have to run every test possible to make sure that it's not some other medical issue, instead of it being child abuse. Child abuse should not be the go-to. But they're also not experts in immunology or neurology or anything like that. And they're not treating physicians. And so the experts on in all different rare medical diagnoses, they would be the ones to say, we need to run these tests. This is what needs to happen. And so the CAP should be talking with all of these different experts. And that is not what is happening. These tests are not being performed. And we know this because even just within the past 2 years in Texas alone, it's over a dozen parents have been cleared of wrongful diagnosis of shaken baby. And that's just in Texas, just in the past couple of years, and just the cases that I know about. How many others do we not know about that are where someone may not have proper representation? I know about these cases because they had proper representation, they had good counsel, and there were money for experts. And so then these parents were cleared, but it goes to show, just like what happened to you guys, just what happened to Robert, they are still diagnosing. These caps are still diagnosing the same way. So it seems odd that you could get it wrong this many times, destroy this many people's lives,
Yes.
and you are still operating the exact same way. That is the definition of insanity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some more trainings and conversations. And I mean, CPS and the police do rely, like you guys said, on the medical experts. And so there needs to be more conversations and more resources too for DFPS, because they are not medical experts and they do have to rely on what the hospitals say.
Well, how difficult is it for lawmakers to intervene once a case is deep into the appeals process through bodies like the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals?
Well, I mean, we're different branches of government, and so the separation of powers, if you're going back to what happened, was that a couple years ago, and trying to get Robert to come and testify and all that. And so, the court weighed in and was like, yes, kind of, yes, you can get someone's testimony on death row. It can just not it just cannot interfere with a scheduled execution again. Unfortunately, we still have not gotten Robert's testimony, and that was and I still hope we can. It's for a legitimate legislative purpose to understand his case and how the junk science statute was not utilized and has not been utilized in his case. And so, again, the legislative branch can't really get involved because the separation of powers, but we do need that information to know what laws do we need to change the junk science statute? Do we need to change other laws? What is going on to where we don't keep having these cases time after time, again and again and again in Texas? And it's obviously, and as y'all know, and Josh, it's not just Texas. This is a nationwide problem.
Absolutely.
It's worldwide.
You bet. Yeah, it sure is. And, it's amazing. I know how the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee tried to get Robert to appear. And I know firsthand that because once he was blocked from appearing once, I came down to testify because he could not. So it was, I got a phone call about 2 days prior saying they weren't going to let him come. And I'd never done something like that, Representative Hull. It was terrifying. But I was prepared to read a little statement. And then I was like, oh, I'm taking questions here? Oh, my goodness. It was a very rewarding experience, but I was completely terrified. I'd never done anything like that. But I'm glad I did it for
Yes.
Robert and to just for everyone else who's facing cases like this. But yeah, I don't understand why that the state has not afforded Robert the opportunity to come before that group and talk to them. That just seems like something that should happen and something that our state representatives have the right to do, constitutionally. Right. So, yeah.
So what would justice look like to you in this case specifically?
Well, I think Robert is innocent based on everything, all of the facts of the case. But I believe that he deserves a new trial to where all of the evidence can be presented. Both sides can present their evidence and have their experts. And again, I know that he's innocent. And the pictures and the brain scans alone prove that he is innocent. And again, the flawed autopsy. I mean, there's so many reasons. And so he deserves a new trial. And if the DA thinks they don't have the evidence, then they need to drop the charges. So it has been way too long. A new and fair trial. That is what we should have here for Robert, because he never had it. He never had a fair trial. Never, never, never.
Thank you.
One of your colleagues, when I was testifying before the committee that December, one of your colleagues, Representative Brian Harrison, asked me, he said, so you're not asking us to unlock the prison doors and let Robert out? I said, no, I'm asking for a fair new trial, evidentiary hearing and a new trial. That not only does that help Robert, but that helps everyone else coming behind Robert. If anyone else were to find themselves in this nightmare, we need the truth to come out. We need to make sure that the best science is presented. Unfortunately, these cases, as you know, the prosecutor is going with an emotional argument, and it's a horrific one. There's a child that's dead, and we think that this guy abused her. And when a jury hears that emotional argument, it is so difficult to come up against that. And you have to come up against it with factual science. And that
Yes.
requires experts. And those experts, as we all know, cost money.
It's expensive. Yeah.
Very expensive. When you pull a neurologist or an ophthalmologist or a pathologist away from their practice to like review boxes of medical records, that's going to cost some money. And it's just, he never got the opportunity to defend himself. So that's just been our battle cry, a new trial for Robert, we don't see the harm in a new trial at all. So, yeah. Well, couple questions left for you. So, how has working on Robert's case changed your view of our legal system?
Seeing the bias that people have, what can happen in smaller jurisdictions in these small rural areas, and how, people, they're family members, they're close-knit friends, they all work together. And so how that can, just a major bias that can uh, bring about. And I think the lack of questioning of our judicial system. I am a conservative Republican. I question government. I am for limited government. And so it's confusing to me where people's view of limited government and the questioning of government stops with the judicial system. So it's like you cannot question. Everything must be done right. And I don't understand that at all. It's another branch of government. It's run by humans. So it's going to be wrong sometimes. And when you're talking about the branch of government that can deny you of your liberty and ultimate liberty, your life, and we're not supposed to ever question that doesn't make any sense to me, especially when we know, the two of you are sitting there, that our judicial system has gotten it wrong. We have incarcerated innocent people. We have executed innocent people. And we know this. And so we should be questioning, and we should be taking steps to make sure that we are getting it right.
So, what do you think needs to happen to prevent what happened to us and Robert from happening to other innocent parents or caregivers?
I think, more awareness and advocacy, which is what y'all are doing. The system needs to change. So, again, we've already talked about it, but the caps keep diagnosing the exact same way. Things are not changing, and the entire system has to change. These caps need to be making sure that before they jump to a diagnosis, that all the medical testing has been done to rule out any possible medical explanation. The first assumption should not be child abuse. I understand that DFPS and police and CAPS and other people within children's hospitals and judges see horrific things that have happened to children. No one is saying child abuse is not real. It absolutely is. And there are some horrible people out there who do awful things to children, and everyone wants to make sure that they are caught. So what protections do we put in place to make sure those people are being caught, but we are not falsely accusing and wrongfully incarcerating or executing innocent people? And we have to change the system, and the caps refuse to do anything differently, and they're going to have to, because this cannot keep continuing. They are destroying people's lives. And again, you go back to, they're not specialists. They're not even treating physicians. All of the specialists need to be brought in, and making sure that all of these types of tests are being done to rule out all of these different types of medical diagnoses. We know that there's different clotting disorders, like brittle bone and fracture disorders. There's all sorts of different issues that can explain why the child that is appearing in front of them in the hospital is presenting the way that they are. And so the jump cannot be child abuse first. It absolutely cannot, when there are so many other medical explanations. And I think that is the biggest thing. And then you're talking about also in many of these cases, it's the delay of care for these children. When you are jumping to child abuse and you are not doing proper medical testing, that is malpractice.
Yeah.
Because you are delaying care for a child and ignoring the underlying medical issue. And so some of these children, could they have gotten better? If care had not been delayed? Or just there's all of these things that are just devastating and sad. So
Yeah.
there's a blind spot within the medical community when it comes to CAPS and child abuse and shaken baby, and it's like they can't ever be wrong,
Right.
and is a very dangerous place to be. Very dangerous.
Yeah, they're
So.
playing God, basically.
Yes.
Well, we thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We thank you for advocating for parents and for Texans that, we know that there are so many people right now that are falsely imprisoned because of the shaken baby syndrome hypothesis. I talk to a few of them weekly, and we know that it can be better. And we look forward to working with you and your staff and other legislators in Texas to see what we can do as a collaborative group to come up with some new bills and laws that can improve this system and make sure that we get it right. Because you nailed it with the fact that when we have tunnel vision and child abuse pediatrician just sees abuse, the delay in care. Is a child not getting treated for what their actual medical diagnosis and illness, that to me is not protecting children. That to me is not, I think of a doctor and the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, right? I think of for prosecutors and detectives, the constitutional oath that they took, when the narrative is falling apart, they have to have the integrity. And I know a lot of them do, but all of them have to have the integrity to be willing to start over, and not have tunnel vision. So we look so forward to working with you more in the future. And thank you so much for being a champion for justice and for Robert and for standing up for what's right. We need more people like you in this world, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you. It was great to meet you. See you down the trail.
Yeah.
Keep up the good fight.
Thank y'all both.
Awesome.
And,
Yeah.
thank you for y'all turned your nightmare of a situation into something good to help other people. And it's truly incredible. And I look forward to working with y'all as we get closer to session and into session on some ideas. So how we can help families and make this situation better.
Unshaken Truth's first season will drop new episodes on most Thursdays and will be available on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Links to episodes and other materials are available on the show's website at unshakentruth.com. Listeners can contact us through the Justice Corner on our website, named after my dog Justice.